welcome Joe Durso.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Really, thank you. A couple, three things. I like to do these informally, please, this conversation. Most of you have had, like myself, in many different careers and different experiences, have done all sorts of lean stuff without calling it lean. And so one of the things I thought to do tonight is actually go back to a little history and then bring it forward to more of the systemized process of lean. Can everyone see that? I know three of the bodies over there. Ralph and I, back 100 years ago, started at Western Electric. One of my favorite jobs was a Western Electric cost reduction engineer. And why I say it's a favorite job, Lou, you and I were just talking about people. And that job was so neat. I'm a graduate engineer and have an MBA, and I figured out I really should be an HR manager. Because it's all about people. And what that cost reduction job did is allowed me to go around and say, so Gary, how are you beating the standard cost? Every supervisor, every hourly employee had a shortcut to beat the standard cost. So all we were doing as a cost reduction engineer is documenting and giving that person the credit for that new idea. Changing the standard cost, improving the productivity. But it's all about people, so that's why I start there. The next gentleman, Mr. Ben, so we had Ben and Jerry. Ben and I worked together in the Lucent plant in Mount Olive. And that was the job of a career. Because we got the opportunity, agree Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. We
got the opportunity to take what we thought was small company mentality, a startup, with the backing of an AT&T. Came with the golden handcuffs, though. Little things, like I mentioned to Lou, we had a cabling engineer who was a world champion weightlifter. So we wanted to put in a gym, 3 weights. No one would allow that to happen. It just, in the AT&T, you can't do those things. I finally got, in case you hadn't figured out, by the way, I'm nuts. And I'll prove that to you over the course of the evening. So I went to the senior vice president, HR, and I said, now, let me explain to you. If I go check into the local Holiday Inn, there's a fitness center. It's unattended. What's the difference between that and the one that we have in the business? So we put one in. Not only did we put a fitness center in, that guy also was a single individual. He came to me and said, you know, Joe, if you had a washer and dryer here, I could do my laundry on Saturday and work. Now, the old Western Electric mechanical engineer said, are you freaking crazy? But you know what? We did it. It's all about people. And so that's part of what I will drive to. There's a lot of times I give you that preview because too many times we think about lean as tools. Too many times we have a senior executive say, go fix them. It don't work that way. You got to become engaged. And so I always give that starting point for what we're going to talk about. A little bit of history. Back, Jerry, maybe even before you and I started working, Henry Ford said productivity and cost, right? Everyone remembers Henry Ford? 1926. Ford had a bunch of lean tools and concepts down, right? Move stuff quickly. Standardization. How standard was Henry Ford's plant? Everyone knows, right? You can get a Model T any color you want as long as it's black. Why black?
Because you can dry it in the sun very easily.
Well, you're right close. It dries fastest. It's the fastest drying color. And when you go back to this, it moves it through. What people may not know, if you were a supplier, everyone here's in the supply chain? You were a supplier to Henry Ford, the box you delivered your material to had to be built exactly the same dimension so that the boards could be disassembled and became the floorboards for the Model T. That's standardization. That's reuse. 1926. Well, from 1926, Ford, Toyota in the 70s, no one really quantified, systemized this stuff until about the 1990s. Now, who's read the Goal? 1984?
Yeah.
Right? Theory of constraints. So whether you call it theory of constraints, you call it just-in-time, you call it lean, about 1990s, Womack and Company brought forward the set of tools and a standardized methodology called lean. So that's what we'll talk about in a little bit. Everyone's familiar with lean and concepts. Taking it, and as Jerry pointed out, what we found, it's amazing how few people implement it. I should give you a backdrop for NJMEP. The whole MEP program was designed to support small to medium manufacturers. It's built on the model of the agricultural extension program. So where you used to have the county agent come around helping a farmer determine how to crop rotate or contour plowing, NJMEP, the MEP network, worked to help standardize and improve manufacturing in the U.S. Lean was the biggest element. Systemizing lean was the biggest element of the MEPs, but it was almost exclusively done on the production floor. And I will tell you, Jerry said this, and there's lots of people who haven't done it yet. There's lots of opportunity to do it on the production floor. Much more opportunity to do it off the floor, in the administrative side. And we'll talk about some of those opportunities. So here's what lean is, the top, and I got permission. I no longer work for MEP. I was laid off from there the Monday after Thanksgiving, and happy holidays. Going through a tough time. But I got permission. They're a great organization. John Kennedy, if any of you need support, talk to John Kennedy, their Chief Operating Officer. He's a great guy. The MEP network has come up with this definition. I put a little bit different down there. Simply said, figure out what your customer is willing to pay for, and that's what you want to maximize. Anything other than what the customer is willing to pay for is waste. You want to minimize it, if not reduce it. Now, if you think about it that way, is payroll a value-added service? Is anything in the office a value-added service? So potentially you would like to look to minimize the time, energy, expense spent on administrative functions. Here's the distinction, value-add, non-value-add. Right? If it changes the form, fit, function, it's value-added. If it doesn't change form, fit, function, it's non-value-adding. Identify it, look to minimize it. You're all familiar with this. Moving stuff around the office, doesn't matter. Moving stuff around the warehouse. Storing stuff in the warehouse. It's a waste. Anybody an accountant other than Jerry? Even Jerry is an enlightened accountant who will agree inventory is not an asset. It's a liability. The organization Ben and I worked with came about specifically because in the old Western Electric, they had tons of inventory. We built 1 million telephones a day. And yet, when we started the Mount Olive facility, there was a cost reduction that could not be implemented. They had these 3 cabinets in the previous product. One of the cabinets was only half filled. So someone came up with a brilliant idea, let's only make that cabinet half the size. Well, we couldn't implement it because we had 2 years supply of the cabinets. Inventory, if you're not selling it, it's not beneficial. no matter what your banker or accountant will tell you. So I would look and say, what's the function? Anyone here in payroll? All right, so I can pick on payroll, value added or non-value added? Non, right? It's non-value added. The customer doesn't care if you get paid. Now, I don't know about anyone else. I don't go to work if I don't get paid. So it's a necessary but non-value added activity. And we'll talk through some specific examples. It's much harder, and why lean in the office isn't done is much harder to see. Right? I walk into a production shop, I can see the inventory buildup. I can see the bottleneck. I see whatever's going on. What do you see in an office? A bunch of cubicles. Who knows what's going on? So you really have to work at digging that out. Questions, comments along, please stop me and let's have a dialogue, okay? Come on. So, some of the lean benefits, a lot of these come from and sound like they're all in production. Lead time reduction. Ben, remember our cell? We built the base station that every one of you uses every day. Every CDMA base station in the United States came through the Mount Olive facility, or subsequently China, where we were replaced. What we found is we could build a base station. There were 34,000 permutations of the base station. They were all custom built. We built it in 10 days. Well, how the heck do you do that if you don't know what goes into it with all of the products that go into it? We did a value Kaizen, put the station in the middle of a room, brought together design, production, sales, supply chain. We found out 3 components determine what we needed. And we could figure those 3 components out about 6 months before we actually got the order. We got down to 10 days delivery, 8 days of inventory on about $500 million worth of sales. Simply by looking and saying, what's the lead time on 3 components? Now, is that production lean or administrative lean? Production, there wasn't a single thing built. It was all before production, right? Production is the dimple. The 10-day dimple is the production. All of this was long before. So I would argue that's administratively. That was the biggest payback. You don't get a whole lot of improvement by turning up the spin on a drill press. But you do get a lot of improvement by not drilling if you don't need to, or by knowing what you're going to do. So, while these components frequently look like and sound like they're production oriented, I would tell you that many of them directly transfer over, either in the support to production or in an administrative activity. We'll talk more details about that. Typical responses of a lean project: get lead time reduction, almost 100% reduced. Anyone in the bidding process, either responding to bids or putting bids out? No? Okay.
I have.
Do you respond to bids or do you put them out for requests?
I did my previous jobs. I sent out requests.
So Dan, you put the request out for a quote and put them back. If you put out, read a requirement for 3 quotes, and the first response came back in 2 hours, within 10% of your target, and you didn't get the other 2 responses for 2 weeks, would you have waited for 2 weeks?
Down.
Very rare, right? So if we can figure out how to reduce the lead time in a simple production support operation, administrative function, we can get more jobs. We can get more bids. We can do that. And one of the one-day introductions to Lean that we run goes through specifically the response to bids, figuring out how to do a one-off bid, how to simplify it, and get bids quicker. Pretty clear productivity increases, typically again on the shop floor. But how about in the office environment? My wife was the principal of elementary school, and I'll show you how crazy I am. She'd come home with all sorts of work every night, and she'd say, Joe, you don't understand, I have all of these interruptions. No one here does interruptions, right? There's not a phone, an email. And I said, now, hon, you do remember I used to run organizations of about 1,000 people, and I know what interruptions are. So how about doing this crazy thought? Most people, and we all think we can multitask. There is no such thing as multitasking. I ran the Lean office once at a large educational facility in South Jersey, and the doctor who was their director, we talked about multitasking. She said, no, the human mind can't multitask. You timeshare. It's snippets. So we can't multitask. But how about this? Oh, and we also, most people, don't have the ability to concentrate on a single topic for more than about 20 minutes. Now think about if I'm doing task A, I drop that and I answer the phone to go back to task A. It's 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to pick it up. So how about this crazy one? 10 minutes before the hour to 10 minutes after the hour. And I don't care if it's 10 after to the 30 and 30 to 10, but break up an hour to 3 20-minute cycles. And in one 20-minute cycle, do not turn off the announcement of your email. Do not answer the phone. Let it go to message. And concentrate on one task, one invoice, one whatever the heck it is. Right? So I said that to my wife. She says, well, Joe, you don't understand that. I said, excuse me. You've got a secretary. If a kid is bleeding and really a problem, she can interrupt you. If the superintendent says, we've got a bomb going on, she can interrupt. But other than that, in a 20-minute window, you can shut your door and not do anything. So how can we make those snippets of time effective? And that really increases productivity.
Did she ever do it?
I'm sorry?
Did she ever do it?
She did.
Oh.
And her secretary wanted to kill me. Because she had to be the gatekeeper.
Would it take longer than 20 minutes?
But, you know, that's a crazy little example of how we can improve our productivity by just restricting the problems, the interruptions that we cause and allow ourselves. How many of you have when I was doing this presentation, I have my email come up with a new email. Okay, so now I go to it. We create our own interruptions. Think about how I could do that. Quality improvements, again, you see this all the time in the production floor, but I'll give you a real simple example of where this works. We were giving a series of Lean office workshops at a software development company. And as we're going around and mention this one thing, and this one woman says, well, you know, I've simplified my life. I have this checklist for webinars. Because I used an example, NJMEP does a lot of grants. And when we do a grant application to the state, we want to make sure it's complete. So we created a checklist for our own little dummy, right? The state folks liked it so much that they instituted it, and now it's a standard. You can't apply for a grant unless you put this checklist in to make sure it's complete, because it makes their life simple. Not rocket science, right? So here, I mentioned that example. This lady says, yeah, I got this checklist for a webinar. On either side of her are her friends who both do webinars. Really? We now have another tool. It's become a standard. So we have a standard work, it's improved the quality, it's improved productivity because they're all doing it the same way. Simple. This is not rocket science. Most of what we're going to talk about is common sense. There are only a few that are counterintuitive. And I'll try to point those out. Start with, it's all about production. It reduces headcount. How many times have you talked to someone? I used to go out and find lots of people who said, oh yeah, we're lean. We've cut everybody to the bone. No, lean isn't about cutting heads. The most successful lean implementation I've ever seen has tripled the size of the business. The company went from 50 people to 150. And it's just booming. By the way, that's a union represented baseball cap maker in Newark, New Jersey. And I'll talk more about why they're so successful. It's only for high volume products. In fact, just the opposite. Lean is all about making production batches smaller. It's what we used to call, and I grew up in the machine shop, the junk work, right? The stuff that no one wants to do. Up the road from us here is a company by the name of Saverna Operations. Sam Appelhausen was the general manager for the previous company that decided they were going to move all their operations to China. But they sold him the business for the junk work, the smaller than 50,000 units. Amphenol makes the plastic components that go in the bottom of the cable. Sam is doing great making the stuff that no one else wants to work because it's it's low volume, high mix, high margin. And that's what he can do. So it works very well for the volume. My company's different. Everybody's company's different. Every customer is unique. It's all the same. And it's not for the front office. Absolutely. It belongs in the office. It's most effective and profitable in the office. So why admin? Again, if you think about the life cycle, cash to cash, how much of any product life cycle is on the production floor? In most cases, it's 25 to 40%. Because it's all of the surrounding. It's the sales, it's the R&D, it's the collecting in the money at the end, right? Production is the dimple in the middle of this total life cycle. And yet, that's where we spent all of our time. One of my favorite clients was, we were hired by the production vice president because he was being battered around. You know, everyone likes to beat on the production guy, and as an old production guy, I'm used to it. Well, this is a company that makes that flower and that tree in Wharton, New Jersey. The parts come in from overseas, typically Asia. But you know, it takes a lot of airspace to move that thing in. So they move them in compressed form. They have, depending on the day, 250 to 400 people assembling these trees. They do it for Michaels and Walmart and all of the big companies. Well, the vice president is getting pounded 25 to 40%. The production guy is getting pounded by the owner. And we go in and do an analysis. The problem isn't production. The problem is the sales manager, vice president, and the purchasing vice president. Why? The purchasing vice president says, you know, if I buy the basket, you know, they came in these baskets, if I buy those and I don't put the staple in the bottom of the plastic liner, I can save a penny. Well, that's great. Except if you don't put the staple in the bottom, I know more about how to put these stupid things together than I ever want to know. You don't put that staple in the bottom, when you put the foam in that holds it together, it floats up. So here's this poor production vice president creating a staple bumping station. Not only do you have to put the staple, you also have to make the bottom of it concave so that it sticks. And he's got two people, stapler. A penny staple costs the company 50 cents. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't pay attention to the admin piece of it. All they were paying attention to is the production.
What was the original problem that they were complaining about?
Why were the fingers being pointed at the production guy?
Yeah, because they were pointing to production because he wasn't delivering as they were asking for.
So was it a cost issue? It was a timing issue?
It was cost. No, it was
okay.
Cost and time.
Okay.
Yeah, he was spending more because of these kind of things. Another on the other side of it. So you have the purchasing guy, right, and his problems with cost. On the other side is the sales guy. They go to a convention, and they set up this display, and mom and pop gift shop would come in and say, yeah, I want 4 of those, and 6 of those, and 10 of those. And here he's making mixed lots, because they're charging exactly the same. Now, is that a production problem or an administrative problem? I would offer it's an administrative. And so that, our feedback, we would not give feedback to the production vice president. We said we want to talk to the owner, you, the production vice president who brought us in, and the 2 peers, and explain this whole program. And you have to be engaged together. So here's some examples of where lean in the office and what has happened. The purchasing process, right? If I can reduce the number of things. How many of you work Novartis? How high in an organization do you have to go for an approval? And how many of the approvals are redundant, rubber stamps, non-value added? Right? I gave this presentation once to a construction manager. He was a vice president of a large construction company. And so John kind of took exception to this. I said, okay, John, you sign every invoice? Yeah, every invoice over 20,000 has got to come to me. Okay. Sheetrock. Truckload of sheetrock comes to the job site. You approve it? Yeah. Do you count it? No. Who counts it? The guy on this job site and his boss, it took 5 signatures to get the job. I said, John, you're a rubber stamp. Have you ever not signed one? No, why would I do that? Well, why would you bother signing any of them then? So, looking at these elements, and the biggest thing that I'll bring about is the tool for how to identify value add versus non-value add in the production, in the office idea. I love this one. 56 days to an hour. Well, we can't, you don't understand, Gary. I've got all of this other work here I have to do. So I have to do this stuff first. Well, wait a second. It's the same as what we did last week. It's a one-off. Giving people, the old Western Electric, we had an exception report, right? I've become a big proponent of management by exception. If it's the standard, how many of you do cycle count versus inventory? Anyone do an annual inventory anymore? I'm gonna have to smack you.
Hey, I just joined recently. Oh, and actually pretty much every place I've been has had an annual inventory, if not more. I don't believe me, it's not something
I'm going to give you a book to read. 120 Days to Accurate Inventory by Don Shelton. It reads like a cookbook. In fact, it's so good that the production manager of the plant company, came to a workshop. We gave him a book. Over 3 or 4 phone calls, he figured it out and did it without us getting a project out of it. It really drove me nuts. But Shelton's is a cookbook, and we've worked with a number of accounting firms who the vast majority have gotten enlightened to say annual physical inventories are wastes of time.
Super easy.
You may have to hand in your APICS membership if you don't get rid of it.
Well, I do my best to
You're chewing the inside of your mouth is just bloody from biting your tongue, right?
well, I just don't like doing it. I just don't like it myself.
So here's some examples. Before I get into any of the tools, I want to start with this. It comes from leadership. The worst lean implementations are the ones in which the owner, manager, leader says fix them. Without becoming engaged and engaging people, it doesn't work. People have the ideas. We need to encourage it and make it work. When Ben and I worked together, we stole ideas mercilessly. And one of the best ideas we ever got was from the AT&T credit card down in Orlando. The AT&T credit card had the distinction of 2 things. One, it was the fastest growing financial card ever in history. And 2, it became so big that it ran the risk of running bigger than AT&T. So it was spun off because they didn't want to say the credit card business is more of a business than phones, like GM. Right? GM Financial makes more money than GM. So a number of us went down and tried to figure out what the heck is it that makes this place go. It was a stupid cardboard hexagon. They had it in the stock room. Gary comes up with a good idea. You go out and you give one. Thank you, Gary. And these things were plastering the walls. The house is a different mentality. We tried to implement it in Mount Olive, and at one point we had the senior leaderships had we had to make it a performance criteria that the supervisor had to give out 20 a month. Capture people doing something right. So understand what you're looking to maximize, what the customer pays for, and then identify and get people engaged. It's really pretty simple. I have done this public, private, administrative, and production. Right now, NJNEP has a contract. We're going to help implement Lean in State of New Jersey office. They ain't ready for it though. I worked on that project trying to get them convinced for about 3 years, and they're still talking about it. The DEPs at the federal level in 16 states worked with the NEPs at the federal level in individual states and have implemented lean processes in something as simple as applying for an air permit. They reduced the cycle time. Right down the street here in Delaware, they reduced their cycle time to get an air permit. Anyone here do air permits? Like number one complaint is it takes too long. The state of New Jersey, DEP, isn't willing to figure it out, that they have too many steps in the process. We were giving them a program, they wouldn't do it. So, but it does work. We've seen it, developed it. I've done it, like I said, in a educational environment, administrative activities. Yeah.
What about the DMV? That's usually championed in some states as being like, they're big, pushing a lot of things online, streamlining things in the the physical buildings. I mean, how did they get the religion to implement lean there, and why didn't that spawn a tidal wave in all directions to hit the other.
They privatized it.
That's it.
Right.
It's not the state employees.
Okay, all right.
But you're 100% correct. DND is a perfect example, right? The concierge. Remember how you used to go into the motor vehicles to get your license and it was this fiasco? Now you walk in, you need 6 points. Okay, so where's your former driver's license or your passport? You know within, and what that is? It's a lean checklist. It's nothing more than instant, it's quality at the source. The first minute you walk in, you're either passed to the next person and you don't need to show it again, or you're immediately, no, you don't pay, go out. But inside 10 minutes, you know. Yeah, they're a perfect example. That's one of the examples which we tried to use in other state agencies. To say, here's a checklist, the simplest of things. Simple stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just to take that off, I just finished reading the Checklist Manifesto. And for others out here, it is an absolutely fantastic book of standardized work. The person who wrote it is a surgeon, and he talks about how implementing a checklist reduced tens of millions of dollars at a hospital. But even within the hospital, there's a reluctance to take on something as low tech. It doesn't cost any money. It's an amazing book, and it's hard to sort of summarize it. But it is lean. It's applying lean principles to the financial industry, medical industry, everything. It's really a great read as a supply chain guy.
Similar to that is Blink. Right? Have you read Blink? So Blink follows up with Tipping Point, and Outliers is the next one. But in the middle is Blink, talks specifically about Chicago Hope, right? And the guy who went in there and implemented a simple, logical checklist. One of the things that we found in software development, in designing product, is lots of front-end detailed work make the activity simple at the end, but you got to put the front end. And so what they simply did is figured out there are 10 questions. Docs, like engineers, want data, and they kept ordering more and more text. Don't have to have that. 10 simple questions to determine if we put someone in the intensive care, the intermediate care, or the regular ward. And they never put someone in a lower care than they needed. They always went higher. But it's simple stuff if you take the time to do it. So here's kind of waste, right? Moving stuff around, inventory, people around, wasting talent, not listening to people. Talent, overproduction, waiting around. How many times do you wait? Wait for an approval. Some specific examples, right? Sometimes people think about people waste of just not having people being effective. I would put it this way: we're not using the talent. Most people, given the idea, given the opportunity, will fix a problem. But you've got to listen to it, create it. Lots of non-value added rework. The machine downtime waiting is a crazy one. I did this with a group, senior partner in a law firm, and we got to this question about copiers and printers. And he said, you know, I've got to go down the hall to print a single sheet of paper because the person who's in charge, Ben, if you'll remember, I used to have the responsibility for all of the printers and copiers was in one person. Well, then, having one less printer saved me money, made me look good. Here's this guy who bills about $300 an hour walking down the hall because no one wants to buy him a $50 printer to make a one proof copy because we're not measuring the stuff that's important. This is the toolbox. It starts where you said, right? Standardized work, quality at the source, checklist kind of activity, workplace organization, making things standard. Who banks at TD Bank? Nobody bikes a TD? Oh. Right? Have you gone to different branches?
Yes.
They're all the same, right? I stopped in at the local TD bank and asked the manager, do you really have it done this way? The pens are here, the forms are here, every one of them. It's standard work because that's the way they can move people around. Anyone work at McDonald's, Burger King? It's pictures, standardized work. Visual controls, we get down to that in, again, McDonald's, Burger King, it's a picture of what the thing should look like. Down there, what is it, number 5, is people involvement. Candidly, it's down that low because most people, most managers don't want to put it up any higher. In fact, if you put it as the first and foremost, you're going to be much better off. You got to get people engaged. Everyone remember many, many years ago, Florida Power and Light and TQM, total quality management. It was building a team, having everyone engaged, the agenda, the stand-up. It was about people. The same thing happens here. It's got to be people engaged in it. We'll talk about a few more of them, but I want to get into some specifics. Here's this whole chart. 5S, right? You make things organized, you get standard work. The entrance to this whole thing, and what's the most important element in an office environment, is value stream mapping. Again, in a production operation, you can see what's happening. In the office, you can't. In an office or any administrative functions, you must start with a value stream. So here's what a value stream is. We get a group together. We identify what the heck is it. An example, Fortune 50 company, got a new CFO in one division, came to one of our lean offices, liked what he saw. We went in, we ran a lean office 101 for his 15-person accounting group because he had a simple problem. It took him 29 days to close the books. Is that not good?
It doesn't work very well. Sorry.
I'm the same way.
Not in any month. 29 days is atrocious. I walked in and says, I can't believe this. World class is about 3. He said, I just can't survive with a 29-day book close. He had an investment of 4 days for his 15-person staff. 1 day to go through the lean introduction, kind of get the concepts. 3 days to do a value stream. Create the current state, the future state, the implementation plan. At the end of those 4 days investment for 15 people, he went for 29 days. Anyone want to guess? He didn't get world class. He got to 9 in closing the books. Non-value added, necessary function, not in production, but it sure helped the cash flow. So that's the kind of stuff that's possible. You got to do this. You got to create a visual understanding, pictorial of what's going on, so you can figure out where and how we can impact and make change. It's another one that most people, again, that's kind of a production operation, right? Well, we don't batch in the office. Sure we do. We do invoices once a month, or we gather stuff up as opposed to moving it and flowing it one at a time. There's a whole thing in this, when I do the one-day session, about a picture of whose desk has 10 invoices on it versus 1. You only have 1 folder on the desk at a time. And you move it, we're done. Oh, let me go back to that. Big part of this process, if I do 10 invoices, and then I move them to the next person, and I've made an error on it, but it's not found until the 3rd process, I've created more garbage going along. As opposed to, in the bottom, I find it instantaneously. So, you know, maybe one of the other crazy things we did in Mount Olive, the old facility manager job was, you can't move because it costs too much. We turned that paradigm 180 degrees. I'd move anybody, any place they wanted, because it costs so little for us to move a person. It was the person's time. They had to choose if it was worth moving. We standardized desks, etc. So if you want to build that bottom model, maybe you create a cell. And this is the mortgage cell, and that's the insurance cell. And you don't have, toughest ones, the accountants and the HR folks. No, you don't understand, Joe. We're HR. We have secret stuff. We have to sit together. No, Joe, you don't understand. We're accountants. We have to talk together. No, Joe. We're the electrical engineers. We have to sit together. No, Joe, you're the mechanic. P.S. We literally created a program called Cave and Commons. So there was a desk, a table sat in the middle of 4 workstations. And if I'm a mechanical engineer, I walk into the other mechanical, there's an electrical overhearing. And the interaction of people is amazing what you produce. Here's a crazy example. That's 1,000 paperwork for 1,000 parts. You know, the traveler and the accounting and da-da-da-da. By simple redesign, you get down to that. Not only is it smaller number of sheets of paper, you may not get the detail, but there's actually boxes here for what was the standard expected number, how many did you produce. There's a pictorial of what the thing should look like, and this covers 4 different product families. A little bit of front end. It's amazing what it can do. How am I in time?
5.
Okay. I'll talk more, and can talk more individually, but I didn't want to go too much into tools and stuff, and kind of want to get to a wrap up here about the concepts and how do you get to it. Yes?
Quick question before you go there. What do you do about reporting and too much reporting?
You mean paper document reporting?
Paper document, yeah.
Request the document by your supervisor.
Filling out, you know, this form and that form and this form this week of the month, and you have to do this the next week of the month, etc. You spend a lot of time reporting.
2 answers. One is talk about a value stream and create a value stream for the process to see what's done with it. And that's kind of the politically correct one. And the other one is stop doing it.
BASF might hire you then.
They believe if it's
Because they're going to fire you.
Well, you know, if it's not adding value, you know, maybe I need to be politically correct and say, so Gary, what do you need out of this report? Can I do it in a different manner? I mean, you have to understand, my crazy world came from a place where we had the old Bell system, and we implemented PeopleSoft, we implemented SAP, and MFG Pro. So we had 3 total ERP systems because the HR department said we can only use PeopleSoft, and accounting said we can only use SAP, and the engineers said no, we need MFG Pro. I worked for a vice president, whose name will remain nameless, Ed Hines, who demanded a black box be built so that the documents and reports that he got out of SAP were placed on a landscape instead of the standard report which came out portrait, because he was used to seeing it in landscape. There's no simple answer, but trying to evaluate and get people to understand and to talk about value add and non-value add. What is happening? Again, I'm nuts. I'm in, management by exception. If I'm not going to do anything with it, why do I need it? What decision did you make based on this data? What could I do differently? You know, there's a number of ways of approaching. The simplest thing, the official kind of thing, would be to do a project with a value stream and identify where the inputs and outputs and what I'm getting from it, and if there's an alternative way to do it. Become a change agent. Small incremental change goes a long way. A big part of the management is moving from telling to selling, and the one that most U.S. almost writes, first level manager in Toyota is required to do a number of Kaizen events, hundreds of Kaizen change events. Toyota would say a change event is a product is delivered this way and I deliver it this way, that's hurrah. We would say, big deal. The almost rights. I can never tell, Ralph, you may remember this, one of the biggest cost reduction cases ever for Western Electric showed up in an envelope. If you remember, any of you remember 100 years ago when we used to make the gongs were literally a brass bell that a clapper would go back and forth, and a guy had filed down 1,000th of an inch and sent the two clappers and the filing. That was the cost reduction. Thinned up brass down. Minuscule ideas. Tremendous payoff. A big part of it's getting people to engage, new skills, especially this one, participating on a team. No one's forecast doesn't match exactly with demand, right? Everyone's right on. If you are, then you don't need APICS anymore. You just go right ahead to the top of the class. Here's some things that may be good reasons to look at administrative lean. Here's a simple concept. It starts at the executive level. What do we need to do? Create a steering team. Here's what a steering committee team looks like. It engages all of the functions, but someone, and I think Jerry made the comment earlier, maybe it's the APICS member who becomes the lean champion for that steering committee. Process is real simple. It takes 3 days to develop a current state, a future state, and where you're going to come. 3 dedicated days, groups of about 10 to 15 people. It's real simple. Do a plant tour, figure out what's important, what metrics do you need, run the value stream, and then move forward with change. It's real simple. Jerry quoted, the other one was Ford, this one I think is Einstein.
It is Einstein.
You know, it's a lot of people are giving this. Ben Franklin or Einstein, I like to say it's Einstein. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Change something. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Now we're all ready to be lean office champions. But I can tell you, I've done a number of lean projects. And it's funny, I always thought all this stuff was production. He's right.